Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. We're going to be pausing a moment and allowing participants to join us, so that'll take just a few moments, and then we'll start it soon. So thank you for your patience. Looks like they're rolling in. It's interesting to watch. We just need to give a few moments for the rest of the attendees to join us. So it'll take us another moment. So welcome and thank you for your patience. It looks like we have the majority of our attendees. So we will go ahead and start. Good afternoon and welcome to the Spring Gardening Webinar Series presented by the Central Oregon Master Gardeners, Oregon State University, and our sponsors at the bottom of this slide. Thank you for joining us on this was said to be beautiful April day, although it's questionable at this moment. My name is Marilyn Clark, and I will be your host today. The other Master Gardeners assisting behind the scenes today are Becky Nurchuk, Helen McDonald, Deborah Wenzel. Our presenter today is Amanda Egertson, whom you see on the screen here. She will be speaking to us about monarch butterflies. Oregon is known as a migration pathway for western monarchs, and other butterfly species also call this region home. Please join us to learn about this insect's amazing life history, their seasonal and overwintering patterns, a look at the beautiful array of butterflies in the area, and what you can do to help support a healthy butterfly population in your backyard and beyond. But first, some housekeeping for our webinar. All videos and microphones are off except for the presenters. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A window. You will see that at the bottom of your screen. We will reserve time at the end of the webinar to answer the questions that have not been addressed during the slide presentation. This presentation is being recorded and will be available online for a short period of time following the session. A few days after the session, you will be sent an email with a link to access the recording. We will also send you any links that Amanda mentions in her presentation, and she has a number of them. Amanda Egertson has been working for the Deschutes Land Trust for 20 years and is their stewardship director, overseeing the management of all the land trust protected lands. She leads butterfly tours on land trust reserves, participates in annual North American Butterfly Association butterfly counts throughout Central Oregon, and is guiding the land trust work with regional monarch conservation. She and her family spend their free time exploring Oregon's great outdoors and scuba diving tropical waters. I'm jealous. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Amanda. Hold on. Oh, come on. My mouse is not working. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction and for having me here today. I'm now going to work on sharing my screen with all of you. All right. You know, I was actually kind of glad to see it drizzling outside. I realize the folks that are listening in are from all sorts of different places. But here in Bend, where I am, it's drizzling, which is a wonderful thing for all of our plants. It's a good day to be on a screen chatting about my most favorite topic, which is butterflies. But before I get into that, just a little bit about the Land Trust. We are a local nonprofit based here in Bend in Central Oregon. and we work to conserve and care for the lands of waters that help sustain Central Oregon. To date, we have helped conserve over 20,000 acres in our region, and we do that so wildlife can thrive, so local communities have a place to connect with nature and to help fight against climate change. So, as Marilyn said, I am going to be sharing what I know about amazing monarchs. I actually dressed like a monarch today. Hopefully you can kind of see me. I've got polka dots on, I've got orange on, and lots of other amazing Central Oregon butterflies. And I have enjoyed butterflies my entire life. Really from a very young age, and I am lucky enough to be able to share my passion of butterflies with my kiddos. They would be appalled if they knew I was showing everybody these pictures. They're now in their mid and upper teens, but they still humor me and come out in the field with me to chase butters, which is super fun. And you might see some snapshots of them throughout this slideshow. Okay, so I'd like to start by doing a poll and seeing, just having folks weigh in on how many butterflies they think we have here in Oregon. So even if you're not from Oregon, it's okay. Take a guess and just go ahead and click on what you think we have. And I'll give it a few seconds, and I guess I'll wait until one of my friendly helpers here tells me it's time to stop waiting. I gotta find my glasses. Let's see. Ooh, people are chiming in. I love asking this question. It's always so fun to see what folks say. Ooh, we've got good participation here. Okay, I'll let my helpers decide when to end it. It looks like most folks, hold on, I'm gonna put on my glasses again. All right. Okay, so will that just go away by itself, or do I have to click on it? Hopefully somebody will chime in and tell me. Don't mind the informal nature of this presentation. I'm not sure how to make that disappear. Maybe I can click on it, or does somebody else click on it? Oh, maybe I just go like that. Okay. All right. Well, if you were one of the ones that guessed that we have way over 100, you are the winner. If I could give you like a free pair of antenna, I would. Maybe just put your fingers up on your head. You're a winner. So if you think about, we actually have 168, almost 170 species, different species of butterflies in Oregon, which I think is pretty amazing. But if you think about how incredibly diverse our state is, everything from the ocean to basically the rainforests, right, on the west side of the Cascades, to the drier side of the Cascades and the desert. There's so many different ecosystems, so many different kinds of plant communities. And with that, we have so many different kinds of butterflies. So it's a really, really wonderful place to watch lots of different butterflies. All right. Well, with that, let's jump into the presentation. I'd like to start this by sharing the story of how a butterfly becomes a butterfly. I'm going to use a monarch throughout this story, but the process is the same for all different species. After we talk about how a butterfly becomes a butterfly, then I'll just share some fun little facts and interesting tidbits about butterflies. Then we'll spend some time exploring the incredible rich diversity of butterflies in Oregon. And then, as promised, dive more into monarchs, their amazing story, and things that you can do in your yards at home to help not only monarchs, but all pollinators. All right, so how does a butterfly become a butterfly? Some of you may already know this story. I find it amazing every time I go through these slides, frankly. It just ceases to amaze me. So first, you got to have an adult female. So on the right side of your screen, you can see an adult monarch butterfly. In order for a female butterfly, monarch or otherwise, to lay her eggs, she needs to locate a host plant. And a host plant is a very specific type of plant that a butterfly will lay its eggs on. And different butterfly species have different host plants. For the monarch, that host plant is milkweed. It can be any kind of milkweed, and we have several types of native milkweed here in Oregon, but it needs to be milkweed. That means if a female is flying around, a female monarch, and she can't find milkweed, she cannot lay her eggs. So once she locates the milkweed, she lays her eggs singly. Some butterfly species will lay them in little clusters, but the monarch will lay them singly. And over here, if you can see my arrow, that tiny little white dot on the underside of a narrow leaf milkweed leaf is the egg. This is my big fat thumb here, and that is the tiny little egg. And here is, I actually took this picture through a microscope with my iPhone, but you can see here the head of the caterpillar. So the caterpillar, over the course of 5 days after the egg is laid, the caterpillar forms inside of the egg, and then it munches its way out of the egg. And right here, you can see this tiny little caterpillar. And we call those mini cats because they're miniature caterpillars. So it munches its way out of the egg. And if you look down at your pinky and look at the nail, the thumb or the pinky nail on that hand, these mini cats are shorter than the size of your pinky nail. Okay. So after 5 days in an egg, comes out as a caterpillar. And for 15 days, it does pretty much nothing other than eat and sleep and poop. And it grows 2,000 times its original size. Okay, so you're looking at your little pinky nail. Now look at your entire index finger. That's about the size of a monarch caterpillar that has finished growing. It is absolutely astounding that it can grow that much in about 15 days. In order to do that, if you think about it, so when you're a tiny little caterpillar and you're munching and getting bigger, your skin starts to get really tight. And so they shed their skin. It just kind of splits open, breaks off. Oftentimes they'll eat it because there's a lot of good nutrients in that. And then they have nice, fresh, loose skin, and they can grow through another stage. Each one of these stages is called an instar stage. So each time it sheds its skin, grows more, sheds its skin, grows more. That's an instar stage. And the monarch will go through that 5 times. Okay. After it is all done growing, it spins a little silk pad, which you can kind of see right up here. And it, in this case, these 2 monarch caterpillars did it on their host plant on milkweed, but sometimes a caterpillar will crawl away from its host plant and go hang upside down on something else or position itself for its next stage on something else. In your garden, in your backyard, you might find a chrysalis under your furniture. It could be anywhere really. Anyway, they spin a silk pad, they hang upside down, and they hang upside down in a J shape. So we call this like the J hook stage. If you ever find a caterpillar hanging upside down like this, it's best just to leave it alone. This is a really vulnerable state at this point. What the caterpillar is getting ready to do, and this takes 12 to 24 hours, it's going to break open its skin for the last time, like we talked about it doing through all those instar stages. And underneath that skin is the chrysalis. Okay, so moths will often, when they're done growing as a caterpillar, they'll gather things around them, right, and form their cocoon. But a butterfly has a chrysalis, and it's already formed under its skin. Okay, the first time I learned this, my mind was completely blown away. So here you've got your monarch caterpillar that was in its J-hook. You can see these filaments have become flaccid and they're just dangling, and then the skin breaks open. And in order to get the skin to let go, basically, it does this crazy herky-jerky dance. It's the most wild thing to witness, but it's just gyrating all over the place, and it shakes that skin off. And then you have your beautiful, fully formed chrysalis. Now, a monarch chrysalis is one of the most beautiful things in nature. It's like a jewel. It's this gorgeous jade green color. So if you see it, they're actually hard to find when they're on milkweed because they blend in so well. But after, within 24 hours of it shedding its final skin, that chrysalis hardens. And at this point, they're less vulnerable. Obviously, they're still vulnerable. And it's good not to disturb them, but much less so than when they were in that J hook that we just talked about. So you've got 5 days in an egg, about 15 days growing as a caterpillar, and then another 10 days in roughly as a chrysalis. And at this point in a caterpillar's life history, it basically turns into what I call primordial goo and rearranges itself from a caterpillar into a butterfly. And 24 hours before the monarch adult butterfly is ready to eclose, this jade green becomes translucent and you can actually see right through the chrysalis to where the butterfly is waiting to come out. Unbelievable. So here you see the butterfly wing. And when it first comes out, its body is chubby. So here you can, hold on, hopefully you can see this. You can see its abdomen there is all full of fluids. Its wings are all curled up because they were fit inside of that chrysalis. And what it's going to do for the next couple hours is pump. It's like doing abdominal crunches, pumping fluid out of its abdomen into its wings, and the wings stretch out and harden, and then it has to just hang there and dry. Sometimes when I'm on a walk doing a butterfly tour or something, I will get questions from folks saying, is that, because butterflies, of course, come in all different sizes, and they'll be like, well, is that a baby butterfly? Is it going to grow to become bigger? And actually, all butterflies, when they come out of their chrysalis, once they expand their wings by pumping those body fluids into them and harden, that's it. It's not going to grow anymore. That is its full size. So after a couple hours, this is another really vulnerable time for the butterfly because it can't fly yet. But after a couple hours of drying its wings, excuse me, then it is ready to fly. So no matter what type of butterfly you are, that is the process that you go through to become a butterfly. Now let's pop into some fun butterfly facts. All right, butterflies can smell with their antenna, which is pretty cool. They taste with their feet. And I figure, if you're going to spend most of your life walking around on tops of flowers, that's not a bad deal to taste with your feet. They drink with their proboscis, which is a hollow straw that you can see in this picture. And what's really astounding, when a butterfly comes out of its chrysalis, it's pumping the fluids into its wing. When it first comes out, its proboscis is in two separate pieces. And one of the other things that happens when it comes out of its chrysalis is it zips those two pieces together and then furls it under, and it's ready. It's got its drinking straw to go. They're solar powered, which means they need the warmth of the sun to warm up their flight muscles in order to fly. And that's why you don't see butterflies flitting about on cold days. Another interesting thing somebody once asked me was like, well, then how do moths fly, right? They're flying around at night and it's not always very warm. How are they warming themselves up? They warm themselves up by shivering. The act of shivering gets their flight muscles warm enough to fly. Anyway, kind of a fun little tidbit. Another thing that you may see butterflies doing sometimes is puddling. If you've ever seen up around Elk Lake or on the shores of a stream or on damp soils after a rainstorm or morning dew, you might see a collection of butterflies. They are able to use their proboscis. They put it down on the damp soil and can suck up salts and minerals because butterflies don't necessarily get all the nutrients they need just from visiting flowers. And this is especially common for males of different species because the salts and minerals can help boost sperm production. And just briefly, wanted to touch on the easiest way to tell the difference between a butterfly and a moth. Yes, there are moths that are drab in color, and yes, many moths fly at night, but you can't necessarily just use that as your determining factor for whether you're looking at a butterfly or moth. There are some incredibly beautiful moths flying around in the middle of the day that you might think are butterflies, like this elegant day moth right here, which looks like some kind of Dr. Seuss creation to me. It's this big guy right here. So what you have to do is look at the antenna. So over here, if you can see my mouse on the left hand of the screen, at the end of this butterfly antenna is a little ball, like a little swollen spot. So all butterflies either have like that little ball or they might have a little hook, which you'll see here in just a second. Moths do not have that. Moths either have these long feathery strands or they'll just have a straight filament. Okay, so if you can, when you're out hiking and you're wondering, is that a moth or a butterfly, whip out your binoculars or try to take a closer look and look at the antenna, and that will tell you. All right, my favorite. Let's hop in to the myriad of butterflies that are in Oregon. Now, along the way, along this journey here, I'm going to show you butterflies from 5 different families that we have here in Oregon. Several of them often get confused with monarchs. Okay, so keep in mind, you got to see several pictures of monarchs already. You know, they have bright orange, they have black with white polka dots. If you forget, just look at me, what I'm wearing. And if the butterfly doesn't match me, it's not a monarch. All right, let's dive in. First group of butterflies. These guys often get confused for moths. These are the skippers. So skippers they're a funny little butterfly. They're all quite small. The one here on the left, the silver spotted skipper is the biggest one that we have here in Oregon and pretty dramatically colored and hard to confuse with anything else. You see that little, I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see the slide better, but again, at the end of the antenna, these guys it's a little bit swollen, but also like a little bit of a hook. Here you can kind of see it on this one over here, the woodland skipper. Anyway, these 3 skippers are quite common. If you are familiar with the Sisters Camp Sherman area, I see a lot of actually all 3 of these different species at the Metolius Preserve. So that's a Deschutes Land Trust conserved property in the Camp Sherman area. Great place to go butterflying. So here you have your silver spotted skipper, your checkered skipper, which you could see in the woods, or you could see even in your garden. I get a lot of these in my garden in Bend. And then the woodland skipper. Lots and lots of different kinds of skippers here in Oregon. This is just 3 of the more common ones that we see. Okay, next family of butterflies are the swallowtails and the Parnassians. Here is the first butterfly in this presentation that gets confused with monarchs, which I find surprising because it's yellow, not orange. But I think the reason why people confuse it with monarchs is because of its size. Monarchs are pretty big, and so are swallowtails. So these Western tiger swallowtails are definitely our most common swallowtail here in Central Oregon. And their stripes are like tiger stripes, hence the name, Western tiger swallowtail. But you see how yellow, it's very yellow with the black tiger stripes, no orange. Okay, so not a monarch. Here I'm comparing the difference between our Western tiger swallowtail and our pale tiger swallowtail. Uh-oh, sorry about that. So my son Eli has dyed his hair every color of the rainbow in his life. If he saw this, he'd really freak out because he was so much younger. Now he's a cool 15-year-old teenager, definitely not dyeing the hair anymore. But anyway, it's a great contrast to the pale swallowtail. So do you see the difference? The Western tiger is really buttery yellow. Really common around Bend if you're in Central Oregon. The pale swallowtail is pale, like its name, and very common around the Metolius River and Camp Sherman area. So when I'm actually out at the Metolius Preserve, I predominantly see pale swallowtails. This one is quite a bit less common. This is the Oregon swallowtail, but I had to include it because it's our official state insect. So now you know a fun fact about the state of Oregon. If you didn't already know it, we've got the Oregon swallowtail as our state insect. And you can see much different pattern of black on its wings than the previous swallowtails. It has these dark shoulder patches, which help identify it. This picture, not a very good quality, sorry about that, but I snapped it with my iPhone at Waichi's Canyon Preserve, another great place to go for a hike if you're in Central Oregon. All right, this is the Parnassus butterfly. And I sort of cheated. I don't ever see these like in Bend or on any land trust properties. Best place to see these is on Iron Mountain, but I had to include one because they are just the craziest looking butterfly. Their wings are waxy instead of like powdery, which is really different. And don't think their bodies look like ginormous bumblebees. They're super rad. Really, really like them. This is a Clodius Parnassian. So if you want to see one, hike Iron Mountain in June and you'll see lots. All right, moving on to the next family, whites, marbles, and sulfurs. Lots of fun butterflies in this mix. Most of them are medium-sized butterflies, so like that size or smaller, much smaller than swallowtails. And I had to include the Julia orange tip here because these are like the robins of the butterfly world. When you start seeing these flitting about, you know it's spring. If you see a smallish white butterfly with orange wingtips, it's a Julia orange tip. So really fun. I included the cabbage white because a lot of folks think that this is a moth. But again, look at those antennae. Do you see that little ball at the end? Not a moth. These are super common, probably in your gardens. Actually, if you're a vegetable grower and you have a lot of cabbage, you might not like them because their caterpillars eat cabbage. But I don't grow any cabbage, so I love them when they come to my yard. These are pine whites, and it's rare to see one of these on the ground. If you're up at hiking in a pine forest in mid to late summer and you look up into the pine trees and you see way up high lots of little to medium-sized butterflies flitting about, they are pine whites. They actually lay their eggs on pine needles, and the caterpillars eat pine needles. They don't usually happen in high enough numbers to cause significant damage, but I think it's pretty cool that they eat pine needles, just different than a lot of other butterflies. Okay, there are lots of different types of sulfurs. These are really common butterflies in alfalfa fields. They use various alfalfas as their host plant, actually, but also very common in the forests. They pretty much all look like this. They're really hard to tell apart. You have to take a really close look at the underwing and whether or not it has like a little satellite here or if it has little dots along here. So I wouldn't worry too much about learning the different species. Just being able to identify a medium-sized yellow butterfly as a sulfur is good. This one's a Western. All right, now we're going to get into the gossamer wing butterflies. And this is my favorite. I try not to play favorites with butterflies, but I can't help myself. These are my favorite butterflies. Just going to be honest. They're gorgeous. And there are several in this family. These are all quite small butterflies. There's several in this family that have this brilliant blue on the dorsal. So that's the top of the butterfly when you're looking down at one. It's the dorsal side. They look like Crater Lake with the sunlight when the sun is just coming just right and going through the waters of Crater Lake. That's what the tops of these butterflies look like. It's quite staggering. So there are a lot of them that have this blue on top, and the only way to tell them apart is to look at the underwing. So I'm going to take you on a little tour of just a couple of them to show you what I'm talking about. All right, so remember the tops of the next several species all look like this. Well, the males do because the males are the bright blue. All right, here we have spring azures. They're also sometimes called echo azures. And do you see this collection of black markings? There's a lot going on here, right? You have these little triangles On the outer margins, you have all these other black dots on the inside. It's kind of chaotic. If you see one of these butterflies, a really little blue butterfly early in the spring, like you do the orange tips, it's probably a spring azure or an echo azure. They are the first blues typically to come out, at least in my neck of the woods. Okay, so sort of memorize, commit that to memory. And now look at this one. Super different, right? It doesn't have all that crazy stuff going on. This is an Anna's blue. There are a couple other blues that can be mistaken for Anna's, but I just wanted you to see the difference between the spring explosion, we'll call it, or the echo explosion, and the Anna's. And now the next one is what I consider to be the peacock of the butterfly world, because there is so much brilliant color packed onto the underside of a teeny tiny butterfly. The Melissa blue is my most favorite butterfly. Best place to see a Melissa blue is actually at the Deschutes Land Trust Whiteshoes Canyon Preserve in like early July. You hike down the rim, go down along Whiteshoes Creek, and you can see them down there, lots of them. And they are so beautiful. I mean, look at all this orange. It goes all the way up the hind wing and the forewing. And on top of that, they have these little blue sparkles. They literally glitter in the sun. Incredible. Okay. Some other really cool gossamer wings. We have juniper or cedar hair streaks on the left, and we've got the purplish copper on the right, and many, many, many more. But I know you don't want to be here all afternoon, so I'm going to stop with the gossamers, okay? I swear this is the last group. Before we get to the monarchs, these are the brushfoot butterflies, and actually a monarch is one of the brushfoot butterflies. They are called brushfoot butterflies because of the hairs on their forelegs. So all butterflies have 6 legs, right? All insects have 6 legs. And these guys look like they only have 4, right? But they don't. They do have 6. It's just the front ones are reduced in size and covered in tiny little hairs. So they're called the brushfoot butterflies. This particular butterfly is a comma, and it's named that after this little comma that it has on its hind wing. Here is an admiral, another one that is often confused with a monarch. I can totally get it because it does have all the colors, the black, the white, and the orange, but just not in the right arrangement. Also, red admirals are quite a bit smaller than monarch butterflies, but totally legit to confuse these guys. Red admirals are actually really common in backyards and in city parks, and they're really friendly. They're like chickadees. I think of chickadees as being pretty friendly birds that don't scare off very easily. And red admirals are the same. If you sit still, they'll often just come and land on your shoulder, which is pretty fun. This is a great spangled fritillary, another member of the brushfoot family. There are a lot of greater fritillaries that look identical on top, just like those little blues did. And you have to look at the underside to figure out what kind it is. But as long as, like, if you see a medium to large-ish size butterfly and it looks like this on top, it's a fritillary. I had to include this one because I love the name. It's a googly-eyed wood nymph. How fun is that? I love googly eyes. Really cool strategy, actually. By having eyes on the outer part of your wing, you're going to fake out birds, which are a major predator of a lot of butterflies. And so a bird will swoop in, take a bite out of what it thinks is the butterfly's head, but all the vital body parts here are left unharmed and the butterfly can fly off. I've actually, if you've ever noticed when you're looking at butterflies, a little triangle piece of the wing missing, it's likely the bird beak when a bird tried to nab it. These are pretty common in the woods in mid to late summer. All right, California tortoiseshells, another really easy butterfly to confuse with monarchs. very common in Oregon and really throughout the Pacific Northwest. These guys gather in the gazillions some years. So they have this natural population cycle that nobody's really sure what all dictates the cycle. But some years there's just thousands of them on a mountain pass, and you're like, trying not to smash them on your windshield as you're driving over the pass. Or maybe you'll be mountain biking on a trail or going for a hike and see hundreds of them on the trail puddling, sipping salts and minerals from the damp soil. If they're this color, this orangey brownish color, they're California tortoiseshells. I will sometimes get phone calls like, I saw thousands of monarchs on the mountain pass. And I'm like, I wish. They're tortoiseshells. Mourning cloaks. Actually, I should say tortoiseshells and mourning cloaks are two of the most common butterflies to see in the winter time if it's a warm day. We're going to talk about overwintering strategies here in just a second, but these guys both overwinter as adults. And so if you get a really warm, like, upper 50s into the 60s, sunny winter day, and you see a butterfly flitting about and you're like, what the heck? It is a mourning cloak or a California tortoiseshell just coming out of its winter hibernation. It was probably hanging out in a shed or in a wood pile or somewhere else where it was getting protection, and it flits about because it's warm enough, and then it'll go back and hide. Anyway, the mourning cloak I include here because I just think it's a staggeringly beautiful butterfly. These will actually come out at the end of the summer, and they'll flit about, and then they'll hibernate all winter. And it isn't until the next spring that they mate, lay eggs, and die. And then you won't see them during the summer because they're going through their egg to caterpillar to chrysalis stage. And then boom, you see a lot of them at the end of the summer. And this is the Great Arctic. I had to include this picture not only because it's hilarious and makes me smile, because anytime you can have a butterfly in your nose is a good time. But these Great Arctics you will only see on even years. So I included it today because it's 2024. It's an even year. And we are going to see the Great Arctics flitting about the woods. The Metolius area, again, great place to go to see Arctics, especially in the month of July. It takes them 2 full years to go through their life cycle. So if you went flying through your life cycle with no interruption, it would take 30 days. These guys will pause as an early instar caterpillar and then pause again as a late instar caterpillar in the wintertime. So we'll see them in the woods this year. Keep an eye out. And the monarch. Okay, those of you that came and just really want to get into monarchs, now's your time. The monarchs are part of the brushfoot family, and we are going to spend some time talking about them now. But first, as I mentioned, different types of butterflies overwinter in different ways. I just mentioned a couple that overwinter as adults. We have butterflies that overwinter as chrysalis, as a caterpillar, as an egg. What do monarchs do? They don't do any of those things. They leave. Monarchs are a tropical species, and they cannot, in any one of these forms, withstand our harsh winters. So they head south, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So at the end of the summer, as the temperatures are starting to drop at night, the day's light is getting shorter, the host plants and the nectar plants are starting to senesce. They get all these environmental cues that it's time to migrate. And they have circadian clocks in their antenna. They have compasses in their bodies. They're able to actually, they have a sun compass, and they can also tap into the Earth's magnetic field, much like birds do that migrate. And they know, boom, it's time to go, and they orient in their direction and they go. And if you are a monarch on the east side of the Rocky Mountains, you are headed all the way to the Central Highlands of Mexico. So if you're starting your journey up in Canada and flying all the way to Mexico, we're talking about a 3,000-mile journey. If you are on the west side of the Rocky Mountains, like our monarchs here in Oregon, you're going to go to the California coast. So you still have hundreds and hundreds of miles to go, but not thousands and thousands. Either way, monarchs typically fly 30 to 40 miles per day. They are, I will say, able to get really, really, really high up. They've actually been observed as high as 10,000 feet. When they're really high up and able to ride the jet streams and just hold their wings out, obviously they can go more than 30 to 40 miles. But for the norm is around that. They follow mountain passes, they follow stream corridors. Unfortunately, we don't know a ton about, it's really, really amazing what scientists are doing actually now to advance technology in order to be able to track individual monarchs on their migration. Right now, the best we can do is use tagging, where you put a tiny little tag on a monarch wing, you release it, and then if you're lucky, because less than 2% of all tagged monarchs are observed in the overwintering grounds. If they are observed, then you can say, okay, that monarch was released at this point here in Oregon or Washington or British Columbia, and boom, somebody that was doing overwintering observations in Santa Cruz or Pismo or any of the overwintering grounds in California, you know it went from point A to point B, but you're not really sure how it got there unless somebody sees it along the way. But they are now developing these microscopic little GPS trackers and putting them on monarch bodies. And at this point, they can only map like a certain distance, but they're trying again, like I said, to improve technology and with the ultimate goal of being able to track the entire migration of various individuals, which would be really, really cool. Anyway, in the meantime, we'll just leave it to mystery exactly where they go and how they get there. But they do collect in the thousands. So along the coast of California, you can go see monarch overwintering grounds, and it's really an amazing thing to see. And maybe you've been lucky enough to go to Mexico, which I would love to do, but I haven't been there yet. They collect in these big masses on eucalyptus trees, palm trees, native pine trees, and they seek, they get protection from predation, from winter storms when they're all clustered like this. And then they spend, I'm going to tell you sort of the short version, then we'll get into some of the challenges that they're facing throughout this process. So they hang out for the entire winter. Whether they're on the coast of California or in the central highlands of Mexico, they are in a cool, moist place where they can live off their fat reserves and avoid becoming dehydrated. Speaking of which, I'm just going to take a quick drink of water. All this talking. Okay, so you're a monarch in an overwintering ground. You've made it through the winter. Now the days are starting to get longer. Temperatures are rising. Some of the native milkweed plants are starting to sprout. Some other nectar resources are becoming available. And you're like, oh, I think it's time. So you leave the overwintering ground. You move a little bit inland in California, go a little bit north, find a mate, lay eggs, die. You have completed your particular lifespan. Those eggs, remember, are going to take a month to become adult butterflies. After that month, that generation of monarchs is going to fly a little farther north, find a mate, lay eggs, and die. And this process is going to continue. It's like passing the baton or leapfrogging your way north. So if you are in Oregon, let's say you're in Southern Oregon and you see some adult monarchs, in the timing kind of depends on how the winter went and how warm or cold the spring is. But late May, early June, you see some monarchs in Oregon, in Southern Oregon. Those guys are on their way north. So they're going to mate, lay eggs, and die. Another generation is going to make it a little farther north. Maybe they make it up into Northern Oregon or Southern Washington, mate, lay eggs, and die. Continuing some years all the way up into British Columbia. So if you see a monarch passing through Oregon and it's early in the year, they're early in the summer, they're on their way north. If you see a monarch passing through Oregon in September, it is probably on its way south. What's amazing is that all these individual generations that are leapfrogging north, they only live 2 to 5 weeks. At the end of the summer, when the super generation of monarchs comes out of their chrysalids and they migrate south, that generation lives 6 to 9 months. They are actually larger monarchs and they assimilate nutrients different than the other generations. They are actually built to do long, strong flights and pack on fat. Not that a butterfly is ever fat, but they need to live off their fat reserves for the entire winter. So they are physiologically a little bit different, but it is really amazing, especially if you think about the fact that the butterflies, the monarchs that are heading to California or to Mexico in the fall have never been there. And they don't have a previous generation to show them the way. They're like anywhere from 3 to 5 generations removed from the last super generation that migrated south. So despite the compasses and the circadian clocks and all the physiology that the scientists have figured out, there is clearly magic involved. I'm sticking to it. That's what I believe. So we're gonna jump into what you can do to help monarchs and other critters, but I will just touch briefly on what the problems have been with the monarch decline. So let me actually pop back to this slide. The overwintering groves in California, the Xerces Society, and I'll have a link to their website at the end of this presentation. They're a really incredible organization that focuses their attention on invertebrate conservation, and they help lead overwintering counts along all these overwintering groves in the state of California. And they have been for a very long time. And they train volunteers who will go out and you look through these spotting scopes and you count, how many individual monarchs you can see in your spotting scope. And then you figure out how many spotting scope views you might get on a cluster and you extrapolate and try to come up with these estimates of overwintering numbers. In the late 80s, early 90s, we had millions of monarchs overwintering along the coast of California. So millions of Western monarchs. And then they started to decline. And let me pull up my numbers here just because it is staggering. So by 2017, we were down to 150,000 overwintering monarchs. 2018, 2019, 30,000 overwintering monarchs. In 2020, we had 2,000. So we all thought they were on, the brink of extinction. And what is happening, this precipitous decline? Fortunately, in 2021, the numbers bounced up to almost 250,000. So over a 100-fold increase and the highest number that we'd had since 2016. Last year, it's a little, in 2022, I won't call it last year, we had over 335,000. So we're like, woo, we're doing it. They're coming back. This year, this past winter, so they're called the 2023 winter, we're back down to 233,000. So it's very tenuous right now. We are nowhere in the clear. And unfortunately, the monarchs on the east side of the Rockies, and I should just back up and say the Rockies they don't have some invisible barrier. There are monarchs that cross over, okay? But just in general, that's how we separate the eastern from the western monarchs. The monarchs overwintering in Mexico are also in severe decline. So what is going on? Climate change is going on. Really severe winter storms take a major toll on overwintering monarchs. They can withstand rain for sure when they're clustered like that and protected in the trees. But when you have massive blowing winds and driving rain or freak freezing storms, it's not good. An incredible amount of development pressure is also to blame. So It's really hard in Mexico as well as along the coast of California. There's just a lot of pressure from development. And also insecticides, especially neonicotinoids, which is a type of insecticide that gets into the plant tissue. So if you are a monarch or a bee, any pollinator that is visiting a plant and you're munching on the leaf or you're sipping from the nectar or you're collecting pollen and that plant was treated with neonicotinoids, if you don't outright die, it will at least have a severe impact on your reproductive fitness. So lots of challenges, to say the least. But there are lots of things that we can do to help. And that's what I really want to spend the rest of this chat with you about, because I feel like there's so much sad and scary news in the world today that just gets us all down, right? And makes us feel like there's nothing that we can do to make a difference. But in the case of pollinators, in the case of monarchs, we absolutely can make a difference. And here in Oregon, right, we're not in the overwintering grounds. So maybe we can't do anything about the development pressure in California, but we can absolutely bolster the availability of native milkweed and other native nectar resources so that when monarchs are coming up through in the early summer or headed back to California at the end of the summer, we can provide resources for them. So let's talk about that. What are those resources? So here in Central Oregon, it's showy milkweed and narrowleaf milkweed. This is what showy milkweed looks like, and it smells yummy. And this is what narrowleaf milkweed looks like, pretty similar. So these are our two native milkweeds to Central Oregon. The Deschutes Land Trust will actually, if you live in Central Oregon, we will mail you free milkweed seeds along with instructions on how to get them started. And I'll have a link on my last slide. And I think we're passing out links via email too, but you can email. There's a link on our website where you can click on free milkweed seeds. If you're not from here, then it's not appropriate for us to mail our seeds to you because they might not do very well wherever you live. But there are other resources that I also will provide at the end of the talk where you can figure out, how do I get native milkweed where I live? Let me just say a couple things about milkweed. Number one, if you do live here in Central Oregon, you can't just chuck the seeds on the soil and hope that they'll grow. It does not work here. You have to start little plants in a sunny little window in the spring and then transplant them to your garden after the threat of frost has passed. Once you do put them in your yard, if you have a neighbor close by that doesn't want milkweed in their yard, then I suggest you put it in a container pot or a raised bed. I have a couple different milkweed patches in my yard, and one of my patches is on the sunny side of my house, right beside my neighbor's fence. And so I put that milkweed in a raised bed because it spreads rhizomatously once it gets going, like in a few years. And the raised bed does a great job of keeping it out of my neighbor's yard. Then I have a patch of narrowleaf milkweed at the end of my driveway. And it's like, it's got, the road on one side, a sidewalk on another side. I mean, it's not going to go willy-nilly. So I don't have that one in a container pot. Anyway, think about that when you're picking a place to plant it. Also, milkweed does have it's filled with this milky sap, hence its name milkweed. It contains what are called cardenolides. That is a poison that is a really great thing for the caterpillars and the adult butterflies, because it means that if a predator comes along and tries to eat it, it'll get sick. It'll make it throw up, which is an awesome defense. So that predator will be less likely to try eating another monarch. But if you have a very curious dog that likes to dig up all your plants and eat them, then I would recommend that you put it in a cage, at least until you cage the milkweed, at least until it gets mature. because the more mature the plant is, in other words, once it's like 3 or 4 years old and really cranking, it becomes much less palatable. And so like deer will often snack on fresh little shoots of milkweed, which isn't going to harm the deer. But they tend to not want to go anywhere near the more mature milkweed because it tastes disgusting. And you maybe will hear ranchers express concern about milkweed coming onto their land. But cows and horses, again, it's really unpalatable. So if the livestock is being fed other things, it will not go eat the milkweed. Anyway, to learn more about milkweed, you can visit our website or some of these other resources that'll pop up. But I definitely encourage you to add milkweed because it's a wonderful thing, not only for monarchs, but swallowtails love it, bees love it, lots of other critters will come and nectar. Something else to keep in mind is making sure that you have something blooming in your garden from spring through fall. So we talked early on about how particular butterflies are with respect to host plants. So their caterpillars can only eat certain things. But once a butterfly becomes an adult butterfly, they will definitely have preferences for where they go find their nectar, but they become much more generalist. And monarch butterflies will drink nectar from all sorts of things. So I really feel like, as will a lot of other adult butterflies, if you're just focused on having native plants and you've got things blooming from spring through fall, you're doing great. And I should also say, you don't need to have acres and acres to make a difference. You can have a balcony off an apartment and have some container pots filled with a variety of things, and you're still making a difference and helping. So that's great. I have this slide up. This is another land trust property. It's called Indian Ford Meadow Preserve, to remind me to tell you that you should plant in clumps. So you see lots of willow clumps in the foreground. Now you probably, unless you do have acres and acres of land, don't have space for giant clumps of willow. If you do, you'll be providing host plants for swallowtails, mourning cloaks, and Lorquin's admirals. And great nesting places for birds. But willow blooms early in the year, so it's a great resource for lots of critters then. And you want to plant in clumps, whatever you're planting, because then the pollinators need to expend less energy to get from one thing to the next, right? So if you have firecracker penstemon in your yard for hummingbirds and you have like one plant over here and then another plant way over there and then another plant way over there, that hummingbird's going to have to expend resources, energy, burn calories, right? Getting from one to the next. So it's good to plant things in like things in clumps so they can conserve energy. I put some lupin and violets up here because they're great mid-season bloomers, and violets and lupin are hosts for numerous species of the tiny blues, my favorite little blues, and also for greater fritillaries. And then these are my late season nectar resource slides, goldenrod and rabbit brush, so great, as well as buckwheats. And they are host plants for hair streaks, blues, coppers, checker spots, but really just vital, vital resources in the fall, especially for migrating monarchs and other critters. And we have been incorporating a lot of these species that I just mentioned and many, many more in the Land Trust floodplain restoration projects. This is an aerial view of Camp Polk Meadow Preserve, where we restored a couple miles of Waichus Creek from 2009 to 2012 and planted close to 200,000 native plants throughout the floodplain. And it's bustling with life now, which is a really exciting thing. And I was also going to mention another resource that I'll share with you on this next slide. Actually, it's a couple slides from now. It's the Oregon Bee Atlas. Is just an incredible group of folks. And if you're interested in getting more involved in pollinators and learning more about native bees, I highly encourage you to reach out to this group. Here are some of the volunteers that were surveying at Camp Polk last year. And they're helping us, the Deschutes Land Trust, learn more about what native bees we have on our properties and also maybe what native bees we should but don't, so that we can continue to evolve and adjust our native plant palettes when we're doing our large restoration projects. So just another reminder in your home gardens, please, please be pesticide free. And also please make sure when you're purchasing plants from gardening stores, whether it's a native gardening store or Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever, that the plants that you've purchased have been grown without pesticides. It's another really big thing you can do to help all of our insects. So here are some resources that I mentioned, and I shared these with the Master Gardeners group ahead of this presentation, so I think they can get them all out to you, or you can just take a screenshot of this. But we have the Land Trust Pollinator Hub with lots of information about monarchs, milkweed, and more. The Oregon Bee Atlas that I mentioned, really cool website with lots of neat information. The Xerces Society, I mentioned they lead the overwintering counts. You can also get linked with the Western Monarch Milkweed Mapper. Tons of super great information there about where to get milkweed wherever you live and other good resources. Another cool thing you can do with the Monarch and Milkweed Mapper is if you see a monarch or a caterpillar or you spot some milkweed, you can take a picture of it and add a data point to their website, and you can see the distribution of them throughout the Pacific Northwest. Super cool. Oregon Flora, I think, is a wonderful website just to learn more about all the vascular plants of Oregon. And I put Calscape on there too. I know it's for California, but it's a really cool interactive website with obviously a lot of very similar plant species. And when you click on different plant species, it will tell you what bees, butterflies, bats, other pollinators are associated with those plants. And then the Butterflies of Oregon, Neil Bjorklund started that website. He is an amazing man involved in a lot of the North American Butterfly Association surveys and has taken absolutely glorious photos of butterflies all across the state of Oregon. So if you're looking for some eye candy on a rainy day, I highly encourage you to go there. All right. We made it through. I hope everybody's still there. I hope you're all still awake. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. This is a Lorquin's Admiral, by the way, another favorite of mine. And I'll try my best to answer what questions you might have.
So we have 3 questions. One from Vicky.
Start with the easy ones.
Yes. I may have missed it, but what plants can I put in that would be hosts for swallowtail or other butterflies to lay eggs on? I have mature, showy milkweed already, but would like to expand the options. Thanks.
Yeah. So did you say swallowtails?
Yes, she
Swallowtails?
did say swallowtail.
Okay,
Yes.
that's fine. Yeah, willow is a great one. Also some cottonwoods and aspen. It depends. Sorry, I'm looking over here. I don't have all the host plants for all the butterflies memorized. So I'm looking here. So Western tiger swallowtail, which is our most common swallowtail, any of the broadleaf trees like willows, aspen, and cottonwood are really great for those. If you're looking for pale swallowtails, it's ceanothus, snowbrush, and ocean spray, serviceberry. Those are good ones. I will say the best thing to do if you're looking to learn more about specific species and their host plants, I don't know if this will show up. No, probably not, because I have my background fade on, but this is Butterflies of the Pacific Northwest. And I shared this title with the Master Gardeners, and they can distribute that to you. It's by Robert Michael Pyle and Caitlin Labar. And this is, I call this my butterfly Bible. I literally take this everywhere with me in the field, because not only can you identify the butterfly, but you learn about the host plant, how it overwinters, when you might find it, where you might find it, all sorts of really cool tidbits.
Thank you. I'm also interested in that. I'm going to have to get me one of those books. All right. Then there's another question here, or maybe a comment. I see the link for Butterflies of Oregon that has info on host plants. So thank you. And Amanda mentioned earlier that she did share that last screen that was a green background with the resources. We do have that, and that will be sent out with the recording. So you will all be able to see that. And in fact, you can freeze your recording and click on the link and take you there. So you will have that resource as well. There's another question. How often do monarchs visit Central Oregon?
That's a great question. So they visit during the start of their migration north. So we will see them in Oregon usually in June-ish. And I say that ish because climate change is having a big
Mhm.
impact on when we see them. And also just, yeah, what's happening with various storm cells and weather systems that are moving through. But generally speaking, you can see them in June-ish, and then you will see them again, typically in like late August and all through September, as generations that are farther north are migrating down through the state on their way to California.
Do you know if they stay around very long?
So I mentioned that those in between generations only live 2 to 5 weeks. After they mate and lay eggs, they'll hang out, right, until they die. I mean, they're just not built to survive much longer than that. And I will say a general rule of thumb in the land of butterflies is the smaller the butterfly, the shorter the lifespan. So those favorite blues that I showed you
Oh,
only live for a couple weeks. It's pretty crazy. The swallowtails, 3 months, easy. Obviously, there are exceptions to all these things. And of course, then the butterflies that overwinter as adults, like the mourning cloaks and the California tortoiseshells, those can live a lot longer. But yeah, you'll see monarchs sometimes just flitting about, hanging out. And those are often ones that have already, mated, laid eggs, or maybe they're in the process of laying eggs, and then they're just going to hang out until they die. Mm-hmm.
well, now that I know your resources, I have personally seen uh, a number of monarchs in my yard. I have two large patches of showy milkweed, and I've also seen caterpillars and a chrysalis once. Uh, I do intend to go to your map. I'm and pinpoint it. So I'm excited by that.
Absolutely. You should absolutely log that data. They would be so excited to get that data point from you.
So for those who don't know, I live in Culver, Oregon, which is between Memphis and Redmond. So it's a really nice little microclimate. We have another question. What was the yellow butterfly that was just before the brushfoot group? It had a little pink spot, reddish pink spot. Its name was C something. I think it was in my garden last fall.
I wonder if was it did you say it was bright yellow?
It was yellow with
You know,
a red pink spot.
okay, the butterflies that are really, really yellow, I talked to them, I talked about them before. I did the swallowtails, and then I did the whites, marbles, and sulfurs, and then the gossamers, which were like mostly the little blues, and then the brushfoots. So if it was up in that white, marble, sulfur group, it's a sulfur butterfly. And you'll see lots of those in agricultural areas because they use alfalfa as a host plant. That's one of many. And they are brilliant yellow, really, really beautiful. And there are several different types of sulfurs. That was a Western sulfur, but they're cloudy sulfurs, orange sulfurs, all sorts of sulfurs.
Well, and I noticed that your images did have the names of
They
the
do.
butterflies on them, but
Yep.
they're very difficult to read. So for the person who submitted that question, look at the recording and you can freeze it. You can get out a magnifying glass and you can look at it up close and
On your
personal if you miss it. Yes, just like that. I know I will because it was pretty tiny. um,
Yeah,
print.
sorry about that. I don't like the names to be distracting from the photos, but that's actually good feedback. I could make them a little bit bigger.
Some of us have older eyes.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yes, yes. I personally I have contacts, so you can't tell, but they're not the best. And then we had a comment from Victoria. She believed showy milkweed seeds require a cold, moist stratification.
Yeah, that is, I'm laughing because we've been through this at the Land Trust. So when we first started, we're able to give away free showy milkweed seed through a partnership we have with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Deschutes National Forest. And um, if you read online or you talk to a nursery specialist, they will tell you to do the cold stratification. The funny thing is that we have tested a whole bunch of our seeds and I can get them all to grow without doing that. So it doesn't appear to really be essential. um, Go ahead.
Thank you for saying that. And I also have grown some milkweed from my showy milkweed seed pods in the past and did not stratify them, not knowing that they needed to be. And I did have pretty good germination.
Yeah.
Um, and I see our anonymous attendee did say she found that butterfly and said it was a clouded sulfur.
Okay.
So uh, maybe she had a book. Um, so we still have a few minutes, 15 minutes. If anybody has any other questions they would like to submit, we have time
Hi,
for that.
this is Deborah, and I did respond to a couple of questions I just indicated, and so they're answered. But what they were wondering about, and I'm wondering about, when you touch a butterfly wing, does that stop them from being able to fly? And then also, what recommendations do you have for watering and optimum
Butterflies?
watering for butterflies? Yeah, you wouldn't want to water a butterfly,
Oh,
but
water the butterflies.
yes,
No,
yes.
this is, I'm so glad that you're asking that. So yes, when and I'll just say this, if you live in Central Oregon and you want to come with me on a butterfly tour, I would love to have you join me. The Land Trust, you can find the tours on our website and sign up for them. And we talk all about how to safely observe butterflies. We do the majority of our observation of butterflies just with our eyes, with binoculars. We try not to disturb them, but it is possible to net them. And then we use a jar that we like feed through the net to get the butterfly in a jar without touching its wings. And then we can pass the jar around so folks can see the butterfly up close. And then the jar has little holes, breathing holes in it. And then we pop off the lid and the butterfly flies away unharmed. But yes, it's really important not to handle butterflies with your fingers because we have natural oils in our skin. And when you put your fingers on a butterfly wing, you will pull off its scales. I mean, even if you're touching it lightly, the scales are positioned on butterfly wings in an overlapping pattern like shingles, but they're kind of like baby powder, to your fingers. And so if you touch a butterfly and then you look at your fingers, you'll see the color, the scales on your fingers. Now, does that mean that the butterfly won't be able to fly? No, unless you were really going crazy. The butterfly will be able to fly, but not as well, and it won't be able to thermoregulate as well too. Those scales protect the butterfly and help it with thermoregulation. And some scientists also think that those scales help butterflies escape spider webs. When they get caught in a spider web, they're able to wriggle their way, and because the scales will just fall off, they can sometimes escape a spider web because of the way those scales let go. So yes, really important to not handle butterflies. And then I'm sorry, what was the question about watering? How to water what?
Butterflies.
No, really?
Yeah, I think
Well,
there
offer
are
a
commercial
watering.
things you can buy that are little tiny pools of water or put pebbles,
Oh,
in a little pool of water.
So the butterflies can get moisture. Sorry, not so that you're, yeah. Okay. I'm like, don't pour water on butterflies, please. Butterflies in a rainstorm will typically close their wings and go hide under vegetation because the rain can damage their wings. But yes, it's really important to have moisture. I don't know that you really need to do anything super special. I mean, if you water it, if you have an irrigation system or watering some time of the day or night, there is usually dew, or even if you don't, just natural dew, they will often be able to take advantage of, or they'll go find sheltered spots under trees or bushes that hold on to shade longer and might have moisture. You can for sure put out, it's not going to hurt, right? To put out like a shallow little dish. Some people will put a sponge because a sponge with lots of holes, you have to make sure that there is nothing toxic in the sponge. It's really important to use only like natural sponges that don't have any weird chemicals on them. But you can put those like in a shallow dish, and if the sponge is saturated, then the butterfly can dip its proboscis down in it. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Some of the people responding to that inquiry suggested muddy water
Yep.
or how to supply water in your garden was the question, and I guess you answered that. Someone also thanked you about the wings. She was at a butterfly sanctuary in Durham, North Carolina, and started to tell the kids that then, but wasn't sure if it was true. So it was. And then we have another, let me scroll down to it. Sometimes butterflies get trapped in her greenhouse. How do you suggest getting them out? Using a net?
Yeah. Yeah. If they can't, if they're having trouble finding their way out, it's insects will often, their instinct is often to fly up when they're trapped. That's actually one of the ways we catch them in a net. Will you either do what I call the swoosh and flip, where you know, swoosh the net and then you flip it. So a couple different things. It's really important when you're trying to capture a butterfly in a net that it is actually like a scientific type net, not one of those tiny little nets that you get like at a toy store with, you know, I don't have anything around me with a really small, I don't know what to experiment with, but you know what I'm talking about, those tiny little kid, little things for little kids, right? That like, so when little girls, like I used to like to dress up with fairy wings and run around with a little net. Those are super adorable, but it's really important to not put butterflies in those because the net is not big enough. So you want a net that has a nice long tail on it, okay? One of the ways of capturing a butterfly is when it's on the ground. If you put the net over it and then you hold the tail up, butterflies, insects will fly up. It's just their natural instinct. And then you can flip the handle over to trap it. So that's why I guess I'm explaining a lot of insects will go up in your greenhouse because that's just what they do. But yes, using a net, if you get a net with a nice long tail, you know, hopefully you'll be able to scoop it and you can just get it caught in the net, take it outside, open the net up, and they'll fly away.
I haven't thought about it, but I suspect you can go online and find a commercial
Yeah,
professional butterfly net.
yeah, I used to tell people to go to BioQuip, was a company that was just a great company for all kinds of scientific experiment or scientific supplies. They no longer exist, but you can just find it on Amazon. It doesn't have to be super fancy. It just has to have a nice long tail. And when I say long, I mean like it's great if you can get a net that's at least as long as your arm.
And very lightweight.
Yeah, nice and lightweight, really fine mesh. Some people like a net that's a darker colored. Other people like a whiter color. It doesn't matter. Just make sure the net is kind of long, and obviously that it's fine material, and that you have a decent size handle too.
So I might add, I have a greenhouse at my home, And I have two of the vents in the roof that I have open now. I usually leave them open all summer long. So they do have an escape route, but they don't always find it. So they are sometimes stuck elsewhere. And I usually use a different type of net to just kind of escort them towards the opening. So, but yeah, I can see where it could be a problem. Well, we don't have any more questions unless someone wants to submit one now. And I'm going to open up my last screen then. Hope you can see that. We want to thank you all for participating in today's webinar. Your feedback helps us improve our webinars, so please remember to complete the survey. And we really want to express our appreciation to Amanda today, because that is a lot of time out of her time to do that. And we appreciate, oh, we have another question, of course. Let me try clicking on that one again. Oh, thank you. Great info was one of the comments. I really appreciated it personally, having grown a lot of native plants and a couple of varieties of milkweed. So that was very informative for me. And again, thank you, Amanda Egertson from the Deschutes Land Trust and our sponsors. And thank you. And with that, we will end the seminar. And don't forget to fill out our survey and you will get the recording. Thank you. Bye.